All right, welcome to our second intern presentation for this summer 2026. Next talk is called System Tray Application. This is Ryan Nguyen.
Taro. So as Taro stated, I'll be presenting the system tray application, which is an application I've worked on with two other interns, which is their extrusion. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently a master's student in computer science at UNC Chapel Hill. And outside of software, I enjoy learning new skills, whether that be like trying new sports. Like recently, I've been trying to pick up like soccer or badminton, and also like learning how to juggle and just like practicing to be more ambidextrous. So just a bunch of random new skills that I've been working on. I just enjoy like learning that and also improving. And so I'll be talking a little bit about why this project. So the motivation for this project came from a gap between, the power and usability. So early on during the internship, when we were browsing through project choices, we were introduced to the iRODS automated ingest, which is a strong tool and works well for, large scale ingestion workflows. But for some users, the command line configuration can be like a learning barrier for that case. So in some cases, users they don't want or they don't need the full complexity of that workflow. So maybe they just want to like watch a local folder or, just have those files ingested in that local folder. So, this project was just about making that experience like simpler for them as well as more approachable. So that's why we came up to this system tray application. And for the goal of this project, it was just to build a lightweight desktop application, and that makes local data ingestion into iRODS easier for them. And the app runs from a system tray, which basically watches the selected local directories and automatically uploads new files into iRODS. And it also continues monitoring in the background, so the user doesn't need to have the main window open like 24/7. And the GUI just is mainly there to make configuration and just management more simple for them. And as for my contributions, here are the things that I worked on. So first, I worked on the login screen and login flow. I will admit this did take like up most of my time during the internship. It was a bit hectic, just trying to get the users to be persistent, like, making sure to, authenticate the iROS session like properly. And then I also worked on, adding overviews and settings tab after logging in, which allowed more space for just configuration settings overall. I also worked on tray menu actions, whether that be including like signing in, signing out, opening the windows, and just like exiting the whole application itself. I also added a configurable uploads retry and a failed upload recovery to improve reliability. And then finally, I also added a timestamps to the recent activity log, to just give the users better visibility into like what the app is doing. So now I'll be explaining a little bit about the architecture. So the app is organized around a few main components. The tray controller acts, as like the central coordinator of the application state. It holds the state, the tray actions, the communication between the UI and the background components, like folder monitoring and uploads. And for authentication, the login flow uses a login dialog for collecting credentials and a login worker, which is running on a background queue thread. So this basically allows the sign in to work, off the main UI thread, and just basically allows the window to not freeze up while it's currently trying to connect to iRODS. And the main window is handled by a setting window, which presents the overview and settings tab, but leaves the state changes to the tray controller. And for background behavior, the monitor manager watches configured folders for file events, and the iRODS upload worker processes the uploads. So basically, the overall like workflow of this is just the file system that occurs, then we queue upload, send that to iRODS, and then this is surfaced back through the UI through like the activity log with the timestamps. And this separation just basically keeps the app responsive and allows monitoring to continue even when the main window is hidden. And as for UI and state management, it was just designed around two main modes, which is a locked and authenticated state. So basically, before a user signs in, the app stays in a locked state where the tray icon is still available, but most actions are hidden. like the main window itself is not accessible. So once authentication succeeds, the controller completes login, it loads the iRODS environment and retry settings, and unlocks the rest of the interface. And I also split the main window into two tabs here, so we can see like it's kind of hard to see, but there's an overview and settings tab. So just basically just we have the overview, which is like the operational view. It includes the monitor folders, the failed uploads, the recent activity, and that's basically separate from the configuration itself, like the iROS session fields and the retry controls. And another part of the state management is the tray menu itself. So this includes like actions like sign in, sign out, open settings, enable toggling, and exiting, which are hidden depending on whether the user is authenticated. And for the GUI exit flow, closing window does not like stop the application, like I said earlier, but it just hides the window. So it keeps the tray app running in the background. But when clicking at the exit tray menu option, this will terminate the application. And as for retries and recovery, so this focus on making upload failures visible and recoverable. So each upload job keeps track of its current state, including like the attempt number, the maximum retry status, and the most recent error. So retry behavior, is also configurable through the UI through the settings tab, including like the number of attempts, the initial delay, and the backoff multiplier. So when an upload fails, the app schedules another attempt, and it sends it back through the same upload path, just as like a normal upload. So retries don't like use a separate like high priority path or anything. They're requested and processed by the same workflow. So for example, let's say file A, it starts uploading but fails and gets like a 5-second retry delay. If file B is uploaded within those 5 seconds, then file B will go first. And then once the delay is up, then file A will get retried through the same workflow. And if the upload still does not succeed and the retry limit is reached, then it is moved into a failed uploads list instead of disappearing. And that failed state is surfaced in the UI, as you can see in the failed uploads section right there. And then this basically, it just helps improve the visibility by, like adding timestamps to the recent activity log. So the upload state and events are, easier to trace and debug. So you can actually see when the retries are happening and stuff like that. So now I'll be going a little bit through the features I worked on. I'll be walking through. So I'll basically be talking about the login, the flow of that, just the tabs that I added, as well as the tray menu options and the retry settings. So first is the login screen. So here's like a example of a failed login attempt. So right now the app is currently in a lock state. So as we can see in the top right corner, the tray menu options are limited. You only have sign in and exit. And then once a user like puts in all their credentials, the host, port, zone, username, and password, the code will try to authenticate it with an actual iRODS account. And then as we can see, I have like some dummy values in the options here. And then we can see it says cannot connect, check host, port, or zone. And then one important thing to note as well, I also added like a show details blend. So that basically allows the user to, see more low-level error messages. So if we're able to, or if the user clicks on that, you can see there's a drop down in the text, and then it also produces that message and says cannot reach iRODS server at this certain port and zones or hosting port. So that basically, gives the user more information about like why their login did not succeed. And now we'll be going over a successful attempt. So if the user puts in all the correct info, then they'll be able to be in this authenticated state where they'll have access to the whole system tree application itself. And then we can also see in the top right corner, there's more options as well, such as open settings, which basically opens the application itself. Toggle monitoring, which just allows the user to quickly toggle, uploads on and off. And then we have the exit and sign out as well. And then for the overviews and settings tab, here's what the application looked like early on during the implementation. As we can see, it does not look like too full. But when I was working on the retry filter, I knew I needed like a good amount of space on this window. So I knew it would be cramped, so that's why I added like an overview and settings tab. So as we can see, there's an iRODS session and all the configurable settings right here. But then in this new implementation, it's kind of summarized right here. And then once we click on the settings tab, you can see I moved it over here. So the users have an actual space where all the configurable settings are located. So it's separate from, the operational. And then as for retry behavior itself, so here's the settings, what the settings looks like. So you can change retry attempts, initial delay, and back off multiplier. So for this example, I have 3 retry attempts, the initial delay being 1 second, and then the multiplier being 5. So what this would do is if an upload does not work, there will be an initial delay of 1 second. And then after that, if it still doesn't work, then the multiplier will take place. It'll take 5 seconds and then 25 seconds. So for this example of why the retry didn't work is because I put in like a fake target collection. So since that target collection didn't exist, we can see right here that retry settings like taking action right here. So we can see it says retry screenshot and it says in 25 seconds. And then we can also verify this through the recent activity with the timestamps. We can see there's a retry scheduled and then a retry upload. And then we can see that there's a 25-second difference between them as well. And then as for failed upload recovery, so this is when like all the retries attempts are exhausted. So I had 3 attempts. So once those 3 attempts were all used up, then that upload will be moved to this failed upload state right here, where the user can manually retry that. So for this case, since I said I put in like a fake target collection, I would fix that by putting like home/Alice. And then once I able to click this and then click retry, then we can see that it was uploaded successfully right here. And then we can also view that in the recent activity as well. And then that was basically all the features I worked on. So for challenges and takeaways, so one challenge was, just getting comfortable in a larger and unfamiliar code base and understanding just like how the different components fit together. And then another challenge was, working through project ambiguity since, sometimes the requirements evolved as like the app developed itself. And then, certain use cases became clear. And this really, pushed me to ask better questions, break the work into smaller, more manageable pieces, as well as, using existing issues or code to guide certain decisions that I make. And one major lesson I learned was, how important documentation is for both the users, myself, or maybe future developers who would take on this project. For example, when I was adding the retry settings, I remember that I documented like a low fidelity mockup on like how the application, like how us interns wanted it to look like. But at first I was just like on a Word doc. So I was luckily able to find that Word doc and then find that mockup. So I basically use that as a reference points to create the separate settings tab and then the overview tab. And, also going back and looking at the issues as well as the suggestions made under them really helped throughout developing these features that we decided to take on. And I also learned a lot through the development process itself. One part of the internship I especially enjoyed was getting to work part of a real software team. It helped me grow as a developer as well as a collaborator. For example, in many class projects, tasks are defined pretty clearly from the start. So it's pretty easy to divide the work, but in this case, we didn't really know like how we wanted the project to be scoped. So that's where the issues came in handy, and then we were able to assign the work to ourselves, so that made it a lot easier. So since I mentioned ambiguity, that challenged me to just think more carefully about like the work, how I wanted to communicate that with the interns because we were working on this as a team, and then how we wanted certain things to be implemented. And I also really like the workflow that we use, especially using like the issues, discussing them, claiming the ones we worked on. That process just made it like for me feel like much more collaborative, as well as gave me a better understanding of how like software is developed in like actual real practices. And along with like the daily stand-ups, even though like we had just like a few minutes throughout the day just explaining our work, sometimes that sparked into like future conversations about like how we wanted things to be implemented, which helped just the overall development process. And then that basically concludes my presentation. I'd just like to thank Tara, Corey for their guidance throughout the summer and the iRODS teams for this opportunity. And I also like to thank Larry and Srujan for being great teammates on this project.
I have a question. We asked this a minute ago. Knowing all that you know now, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, so the thing that I definitely would have done differently, I mean, you guys kind of stressed this earlier on with just like creating the GitHub issues. And like that really just like once we figured out like the workflow and went through Git school, I feel like that's when like our progress like really ramped up.
Yeah.
So maybe like just like understanding that workflow earlier on would definitely help us like progress like a lot faster during the beginning initial struggles. So
It's definitely not real until it's real.
yeah.
So it's hard to make that go faster.
You mentioned in the beginning of your talk that the login, it took you a little while to get that going. What were some of the challenges that you experienced, or what led to that being taking more time than you expected?
Yeah, so the main thing that was like taking the most time would I say, or I would say it would be just like how it looked like the UI itself, but then also like getting like the users authenticated, like just understanding like the Python iROS client like took quite a while because you guys gave us the GitHub repo for that. So just like learning about that and learning how to communicate with iROS through Python was like one of the main things that took the most time for that.
Was there something in the documentation that you felt was not very clear?
And it's not that it wasn't really clear. It was just a big like a lot of documentation to take in at once. So that mainly like was halting me making fast progress on that. But during the meetings, I know you guys mentioned like certain like issues to look at in that repo, so that also really helped as well.
Good. Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but how different did you find this internship was from like the classes you were taking in your master's program? Was it like vastly different?
Yeah, so this is my first internship experience. So I mean, master's program for me, it's a bit similar to undergrad. It's just like classes are a bit more technical and like more theoretical. So like nothing really big changed in that sense. But as for this internship, I would say like it kind of met my expectation. At first, I thought it was going to be, or actually at first I thought it was going to be a little bit harder to like get used to working with a new team, like learning the environment. But, everyone here kind of made that process easy, laid out all the documentation that was needed and stuff like that. So that definitely exceeded my expectation at that point on how kind of like seamless it was to get onboarded onto this opportunity.
Very good. Well, thank you.